ever feel like you're just like drowning in choices? Like everything from finding the absolute perfect apartment to even just what to have for dinner. There are just too many options.
Oh, totally, totally. And, it's really interesting. This actually kind of mirrors like these really complex problems that computer scientists, they've been trying to crack for like forever. And the cool thing is these solutions, they often come from algorithms and they can be so helpful for our own lives, like surprisingly so, even counterintuitive.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. So how does computer science actually help me make like better decisions? You got an example for me?
Yeah, let's talk about this thing. It's called the secretary problem. And the book uses this, right, to illustrate this thing, the 37% rule. So imagine, right, you're interviewing for a job or even trying to find like the best apartment and you want to make sure you pick the absolute best one, right? But here's the catch. You can't go back once you reject someone or, swipe left on that apartment listing.
Oh my gosh, yes. The pressure is so real when you're apartment hunting. So, okay, how does this whole 37% rule thing, how does that even work with this?
It's all about like finding that sweet spot, that balance between like exploring what's out there, all the options, but also like not waiting too long to commit to something. So the 37% rule basically says spend about the first 37% of your search just like looking around, getting a feel for what's out there, and then bam, once you hit that like magic number, be ready. The very next option that's better than all the ones before, you go for it.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying I should just like ignore the first 37% of apartments I see? What if like I miss out on some like hidden gem right off the bat?
No, it's not about ignoring them.
Right.
It's more about like using that initial period to kind of figure out what you like, what you don't like. It's like setting your standards, gathering data, but like without the pressure of making a decision yet. And statistically speaking, this is the approach that like mathematically gives you the best odds of finding that, amazing, perfect option.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this works, but does this like actually work in the real world? Like, are there actual people out there using this 37% rule to make huge life decisions?
There are. The book talks about this professor, right?
Sure.
Michael Trick. And get this, he used this very rule to find his wife. Like he actually like sat down, calculated the time frame, applied the 37% rule, and then proposed to like the next person who he felt, outshined all the others.
Wow, talk about putting a lot of faith in an algorithm. But like love, that's not just some math equation, right?
Of course not. Of course not. And the funny thing is, even Michael Trick himself, he's admitted he looked a bit longer than that, 37% mark. But, having that framework, that structure, it probably gave him like a sense of confidence. Like, okay, I've got this, when he was making this like massive life decision.
So it's more like a tool, right? Like a guide to help navigate these big life-altering choices, not like a rigid rule book you have to follow, like to the letter.
Exactly. It's just fascinating to see how something like the 37% rule, while not meant to be taken, super literally, can be this incredibly useful thing, a framework, a starting point for navigating decisions, whether it's finding a partner, a career, even just like deciding where to live.
This is really making me rethink how I approach decision making. It's not just about like trusting your gut, but actually understanding these underlying, structures that can help make more informed choices. I like it. But this whole optimal stopping thing, it's like, are you ever really stopping? That seems like you're kind of stuck with like just what you know what I mean?
That is such a good point. And it actually brings us to like this other really interesting concept from the book. They call it the explore, exploit trade-off.
Explore, exploit. Okay.
Yeah. So it's all about finding that balance, right? Like sticking with what you know works, but also like venturing out, trying new things, seeing what else is out there.
Okay, no, I get it. Totally. Like, do you go to your all-time favorite restaurant, right? The one you love, they never disappoint. Or do you try that like brand new place that just opened up down the street?
Exactly. And the book talks about this like super interesting tool. It's called the Gittins Index. It's kind of a mouthful.
The Gittins Index, huh? Sounds kind of intense.
Yeah, it's a little mathy if you really get into it. But like, imagine this. You've got a row of slot machines, right? And each one has a different payout, but you don't know what they are. Gittins Index basically helps you figure out which machine to play and when to maximize like your chances of winning big over time. It's about finding that balance, exploring new options, but also remembering which ones have treated you well in the past.
So it's like a strategy guide almost for knowing when to be adventurous versus playing it safe. Man, I could use that in like so many areas of life.
Totally. And yeah, the actual math behind it is probably like a little much to break out for every little, the book
New.
actually has this really helpful table for like common situations. But the main thing to remember is like just knowing about this explore/exploit thing, it helps us make smarter choices. Could be anything.
Yeah.
Trying new restaurants, yeah, but also bigger stuff like your career.
Ugh, don't I know it? That's like exactly where I'm at right now, actually. Trying to decide if I should stick with what I know or like branch out, try something totally different. It's scary.
And that is a perfect example of this playing out in real life.
Right.
Think about it. If you only ever stick with the familiar, it might feel safe, but are you missing out on some amazing opportunities? On the other hand, if you're always chasing the new thing, it's easy to get like scattered, unsatisfied. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Balance is key for sure. But this whole explore/exploit thing, it's not just a personal thing, right? Like, I feel like I've heard this in the context of like research or even like big companies.
You're absolutely right. The book actually uses medical trials as an example. Imagine you're a researcher, you're working on some new treatment for like a serious illness, right? You could stick with the standard treatment, the one everyone knows has known outcomes.
Yeah.
Or you could try this new thing, this experimental treatment. Could be way more effective. But there are risks, unknowns. How do you even choose?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a tough one. How do you even begin to make a decision like that?
It's a huge dilemma, ethically, logistically, you name it. And it really highlights how this idea, explore/exploit, it's not just this abstract concept from computer science.
Yeah.
It has real-world consequences. How do you balance, the chance of discovering something groundbreaking with keeping people safe, the patients?
It makes you realize this isn't just about me picking a restaurant or whatever. It's like way bigger, like how we make decisions as a whole society.
Exactly. And honestly, it shows up in some surprising places. Ever wonder how, like, Amazon gets you your packages so fast?
Okay, yes. It's like magic. How do they do that?
Caching. That's the secret sauce.
Caching, like hiding snacks in my desk drawer for later.
Well, not exactly. Haha. In computer science, caching means you store certain data, the stuff you use a lot, in a really easy to access place so you can get to it super fast.
Yeah.
So Amazon, right, they use this to like predict what you're going to buy, and they put those items in warehouses that are closer to you. Faster delivery.
So they're like using this computer science trick in the real world to like make their whole operation run smoother. That's kind of brilliant.
It is. And the funny thing is, this whole caching idea, it's actually related to how our brains work too.
Wait, hold on. Are you about to tell me my brain is basically a computer? Because I don't know if I'm ready for that.
It's not quite that simple, but there are some interesting parallels. Like the book talks about how our memory, it functions a lot like a cache. Our brain prioritizes information based on how recently we used it and how often.
Oh, okay. So that's why I can never remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, but I can still quote like lines from my favorite childhood movie.
Exactly. The things we access most often, they stay at the top of our mental to-do list, so to speak. While the stuff we don't use as much, it gets kind of pushed down further down the list, but that doesn't mean it's gone, and it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Okay, that's good to hear. For a second there, I thought you were going to tell me I needed like a brain upgrade. But really, if our brains naturally do this, does that mean it's like a losing battle to try and remember everything?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And it leads us to like this really fascinating point the book makes about how understanding the limits of our own minds, it can be incredibly freeing.
Freeing. How is that freeing? Honestly, the idea that like my brain only has so much space, it kind of stresses me out. Like, what if I start forgetting like really important stuff?
Oh, yeah, I feel that. But here's the thing, and this is what I love about this book. It's like it changes how you think about forgetting.
Yeah.
It's not a failure. It's just like what happens when you've lived a life,
Mhm.
You learn things, you have experiences, it's all part of it. As we get all this information, our brains get better at deciding what's important, what we need to hold on to. Like, it's a really good search engine.
So instead of freaking out when I can't remember where I put my keys, I should be like, yes, my brain is making space for even more important things.
Exactly. And there's actually research on this. The book talks about how a lot of what we think is like, oh, no, I'm getting older, my memory's going. It's really just our brains getting like full. More info, more densely packed. It might take a little longer to find what we need, but everything's still there working.
Okay, now that is reassuring, not gonna lie. So it's not that I'm getting worse at remembering, it's more like my brain is turning into this massive library.
Exactly. But, and this is a big but, especially now, right? Like, think about it. Phones, social media, the news, it's like constant information overload.
Hmm.
Kind of makes you wonder, are we overloading our brains? Like make it harder to focus on what actually matters.
Oh, that is a little unsettling. Are you saying all this tech is actually making it harder for us to, like, process stuff, make sense of the world?
I wouldn't say blame exactly, but we got to think about the impact, right? That's what I like about this book. It makes you think about these computer ideas, caching, explore/ploy, but like on a huge scale, not just our own heads, but like how we understand the whole world.
Wow. Okay, so we went from apartments to medical trials to literally how our brains work. A lot to unpack here. So, for our listeners, what's like the key takeaway? How can we use this stuff from algorithms to live by in our own lives?
It's not like a rule book,
Yeah.
but it's all about this idea of computational kindness,
Mm.
recognizing that our minds have limits and so do other people's, and that we can like design our lives, our systems to make things easier.
Computational kindness, I love that. What does that look like, though, like practically speaking?
It could be small stuff even. Like instead of giving someone a million options, narrow it down for them, make it easier to choose. Or how about this? Structure meetings so people aren't overwhelmed. Or even just like cutting yourself some slack, being kind to yourself when you forget something. We all do it.
So it's not about trying to, like, become superhuman, remember every single thing, make perfect decisions, but being aware that we have limits and that we can work with those limits, not against them.
Exactly. And I think at the end of the day, that's the most important message of this book. When we understand these computer science ideas, we can actually make better choices, be kinder to ourselves, and make the world a little easier, a little kinder for everyone.
I love that. That is a beautiful thought to end on. If you want to dive deeper into these ideas, and trust me, there's so much more, go check out Algorithms to Live By. You might be surprised what you discover. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.